It is very boring, but I promise you that the habit I'm going to show you is unfair and will make you earn your first dollar and more. The first thing I need to explain is that we live in an era where you're constantly being attacked and threatened, attacked by industries chasing one thing and one thing only: money. The money you earn with your time, the money that is already limited. I know you've heard people say things like this before, but here's where it gets interesting. The industries that want your money usually end up getting it somehow, some way, eventually. Why? Because they've positioned themselves. They've positioned themselves in the way they approach you, the way they identify a need, the way they offer a solution, and the way they make that solution attractive enough for you to say yes. Take insurance, for example. They promise protection, security, peace of mind. They position themselves as something useful, something necessary. If you get sick, they cover most of the expenses. Their pricing changes depending on income, which means they can reach almost everybody. The monthly payment feels small, reasonable, harmless. But once you start paying, they're collecting money every month, every single month. It's almost like a small percentage of your salary belongs to them now. And of course, it's always easier to sign up than it is to leave. They're positioned, and whether you realize it or not, you need to do the same. Let's take YouTube. If you want people to watch your content, you first identify a need, a niche, a problem, a curiosity. Then you create something valuable enough that people willingly exchange their attention for it. Not their money, their attention. And attention comes first, money comes later. At least that's what I eventually learned the hard way. Because there was a time when I had absolutely no clue what any of this meant. I wasn't thinking about positioning. I wasn't thinking about value. I wasn't thinking about attention. I was just thinking about money. Specifically, why I didn't have any. I remember sitting in my room after work. Same routine every day. I'd come home exhausted, throw my keys on the desk, sit in my chair, open YouTube, watch people talk about businesses, side hustles, and investing, freedom. And somehow every single video made it sound like everybody was making money except me. I don't know if you've ever felt that. That strange feeling where it looks like the entire world got the instruction manual and somehow yours got lost in the mail. That's exactly how it felt. I wasn't broke in the dramatic movie sense. I could pay my bills, buy food, go out occasionally. But there was always this feeling in the background, a quiet frustration, like life was happening somewhere else. Like other people had access to opportunities I couldn't even see. One night I was scrolling through videos, half paying attention, half daydreaming, and a guy said something that annoyed me immediately. He said, "Making your first dollar isn't hard." I remember rolling my eyes because every person saying that already seemed to have money. It's easy to say making money isn't hard when you're recording the video from a house worth more than my entire family's savings. So I clicked away, but the sentence stayed in my head. Not because I agreed with it, because I hated it. For days it kept coming back. Making your first dollar isn't hard. Making your first dollar isn't hard. Making your first dollar isn't hard. Then something strange happened. I started paying attention, not to the people making money, to what they were actually doing. And what I noticed was surprisingly boring. There was no secret strategy, no hidden website, no magic business model. In fact, the thing almost all of them had in common was so unremarkable that I nearly ignored it. They spent ridiculous amounts of time observing. That's it. Observing, watching, paying attention, looking for gaps, looking for needs, looking for problems. And the more I noticed it, the more uncomfortable I became. Because observing sounds passive, it sounds lazy, it sounds like you're doing nothing. And I hated that. I wanted action, I wanted movement, I wanted results, and I wanted to feel productive. Instead, I kept finding people who were quietly studying the world around them, almost like hunters waiting patiently in the dark. I didn't understand it, not yet, but a few weeks later something happened that completely changed the way I looked at money. And it started with one of the most ordinary conversations I've ever had. A conversation so forgettable that I almost didn't pay attention to it. But if I had ignored it, I never would have earned my first dollar online. I used to think the reason I wasn't making money was because I didn't know enough. So I kept watching videos, more advice, more strategies. But one day I realized something embarrassing. The people making money weren't spending all day learning. They were spending all day noticing problems, noticing frustrations, noticing things everyone else walked past. And honestly, that realization irritated me because learning feels productive, noticing feels boring. But one of those things eventually made me money. The other kept me sitting in the same chair. The conversation happened during a lunch break. Nothing special, no dramatic moment, no life-changing speech. Just two guys standing near a vending machine. One of them was complaining. Actually, complaining isn't even the right word. He was frustrated. The kind of frustration that leaks into every sentence without you realizing it. He kept talking about a local business he used regularly. Every week there was some problem. Their website was confusing and their booking system barely worked. The customer service never answered, and yet somehow everybody still used them. I remember nodding while he talked. Then I went home and forgot about it. Or at least I thought I did. A few days later, I found myself checking that company's website. Not because I planned to start a business and not because I had a grand vision, mostly because I was bored. And what I found was exactly what my coworker described. The site looked like it hadn't been updated in years. Half the information was unclear. Some pages loaded slowly, others didn't load at all. The strange part wasn't that it was bad. The strange part was that people still depended on it. That detail stayed with me. People hated it, but they needed it. For some reason, that felt important. At the time, I couldn't explain why. I just kept looking. Then I started noticing something else everywhere. Not just that business, everywhere. People constantly complained about things. At work, online, in conversations, in comments, in reviews. At first, it sounded like noise. Then it started sounding like clues. The guy complaining about the barber booking app. The woman frustrated with delivery times. The student annoyed by complicated software. The freelancer struggling with invoices. The more attention I paid, the more problems seemed to appear. It was almost unsettling, like buying a red car and suddenly seeing red cars everywhere. The weird thing about money is that it hides inside complaints, not opportunities. Complaints. People will literally tell you what they want fixed for free every day. But most of us ignore it because complaints sound negative. I ignored them too, until I realized every complaint is evidence of demand. Nobody complains about things they don't care about. And that changed the way I listened to people. At some point, I stopped hearing complaints as negativity. I started hearing them as unfinished transactions. Somebody wants something and they can't get it, and the frustration is leaking out of them. And that's all a complaint really is, the person reaching for a solution that doesn't exist yet, or one that isn't good enough. Once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. The funny thing is I still wasn't making any money. Not a single dollar. In fact, if you had looked at my life from the outside, it would have appeared completely unchanged. Same job, same apartment, same routine, same bank account. The only difference was happening inside my head. I was paying attention differently, and honestly, it felt useless. That's probably the hardest part of this habit. There's no immediate reward. Nobody congratulates you for observing. Nobody applauds you for noticing patterns. You don't feel productive. You don't feel successful. You feel like you're wasting time. I remember questioning myself constantly. What exactly am I doing? What am I even looking for? Where is this supposed to lead? Those questions followed me everywhere. Then one evening, something happened. I was scrolling through a forum, a random thread, a random discussion. People were talking about a specific problem related to content creation. Dozens of comments, hundreds of complaints, everybody describing the same issue in slightly different ways. Normally, I would have kept scrolling. Instead, I stayed. I read everything. Then I noticed something strange. Nobody had a good solution. There were partial solutions, complicated solutions, expensive solutions, but no simple solution. That realization gave me a strange feeling, a feeling I hadn't experienced before. Not excitement, curiosity, the kind that makes you sit forward in your chair, the kind that makes you forget what time it is. I spent hours reading, hours, and by midnight I wasn't asking, how do I make money? I was asking, why hasn't somebody fixed this yet? That question felt different. It pulled my attention somewhere new. Because for the first time, money wasn't the center of my thinking. The problem was. And that's when things started changing. Not externally, internally. I became obsessed, not with entrepreneurship, not with becoming rich, with understanding. Understanding why people struggled with certain things. Understanding why some solutions worked and others failed. Understanding what people actually wanted, not what they claimed they wanted. Those aren't always the same thing. I started carrying a notebook. Nothing fancy, just a cheap notebook. And whenever I noticed recurring frustrations, I wrote them down. Most of them went nowhere. Some were ridiculous and some made no sense. Some I completely misunderstood. But every once in a while I'd notice the same problem appearing again and again and again. Different people, different situations, Same frustration, that repetition mattered, because repetition signals demand. Though I didn't know that word back then, I only knew that certain problems refused to disappear. Then one Saturday morning, I opened that notebook, started reading through pages of observations, and one idea jumped out at me, not because it was brilliant, because it was simple, almost embarrassingly simple. Simple enough that I nearly ignored it. But that tiny idea would eventually lead to the first dollar I ever earned online. The crazy part? The idea itself wasn't valuable. The habit that revealed it was, and when I finally acted on it, the result wasn't what I expected at all. I wish I could tell you that the moment I acted on that idea, everything changed. It didn't. The first version was terrible. I spent hours putting it together, convinced people would love it. Nobody cared. A few people looked at it, most ignored it. One person even pointed out a problem I should have noticed immediately. It was frustrating, embarrassing, honestly. But unlike all the other times I'd failed before, something felt different. Because this time I wasn't guessing. I wasn't chasing some random opportunity I found on YouTube. I wasn't copying somebody else's path. I was trying to solve a problem I'd actually seen, a problem real people had already described hundreds of times. So I adjusted it, then adjusted it again and again. A few weeks later, I got a notification, a payment, small, ridiculously small, the kind of amount most people wouldn't even notice. But I stared at it for minutes because it wasn't about the money. It was proof. Proof that somebody I had never met exchanged something valuable for something I created. That first dollar changed the way I looked at the world. Not because it made me rich, because it revealed something. The people and companies taking your money aren't necessarily smarter than you. They've simply learned to observe what others ignore. That's the habit. The boring habit. Not grinding harder, not chasing trends, not waiting for motivation. Just paying attention, really paying attention to frustrations, to patterns, to complaints, to unmet needs. Most people hear noise, a few people hear opportunities, and over time, those opportunities become products, businesses, careers, income. My first dollar didn't come from having the best idea. It came from finally noticing something that had been sitting right in front of me the entire time. And chances are, the opportunity for yours is already sitting in front of you too.